So today's guest is someone who knows the Florida insurance game inside and out because he was literally raised in it. I'm talking about Mark Wilcox, co-owner of Wilcox Family Insurance right here in Fort Myers, Florida. Mark is part of a true insurance dynasty. His father has been in the industry for over 30 years. That's impressive. And many of his aunts and uncles are also in the business. Mark and his sister Jessica were groomed from a young age to carry on the family legacy, and they've done exactly that, officially taking the reins after their father's retirement, though word has it he's not fully ready to admit that yet.
Not quite. Still in denial.
He's still in denial. Mark graduated from the University of South Florida with a degree in finance, but when it came time to choose a career path, he decided to come back home and join the family business. He's a proud family man, deeply rooted in Southwest Florida, and values being close to his parents and siblings above all else. So when he's not navigating the stormy waters of the Florida's property and flood insurance market, you'll find him enjoying the simple joys of life like football, fishing, and spending time with family. Mark's got the inside scoop on what's really happening in the Florida insurance world and where it's heading and what homeowners can do about it. So let's welcome Mark Wilcox to the show.
Thanks again for having me, Doug. I appreciate it. And yeah, there's a lot changing in the industry, and I'd be happy to divulge any information I can to try to help you guys navigate these crazy, crazy times.
It is crazy times, man. I mean, just so many people out there that are, like, let's just say, like, people on fixed incomes, et cetera. The real estate market's been, declining since around September of 2022. And I think insurance has been, has played a role in it.
Yeah.
Right? Rising insurance rates.
It definitely hasn't made your guys' job any easier. I mean, our job has definitely been a nightmare the last 6-7 years for homeowners insurance. And it's only gotten worse. The good news is I think we're finally at the precipice of a time where things are going to start getting better. We're hearing things from company CEOs. Obviously, DeSantis' ruling has a lot of fact and bearing to some of the changes that are coming. So good things are coming. It's just like anything, it's going to take time. But we're already starting to see some stuff in the industry from an auto and homeowners perspective. And again, hopefully that'll help real estate become more favorable and turn back around too, because it's tough to buy a house. I mean, so many people move down here and get sticker shock when they see how much homeowners is. And then we got to tell them they're in a flood zone. And then that usually kind of turns them off. All of a sudden it goes from 5,000 to 10,000. And it's crazy. It's gotten insane, especially where it was when I first started with the family. I mean, when I first started, I was paying $700 for my home and about $500 for my flood, and now it's over about $7,000 total for, a house that's 20 years old. So
yeah,
a lot has changed, and the good news change comes both ways. Just like with your industry, it was red hot 3 years ago, and now it's kind of died down a little bit, but it's ebbs and flows with any industry. Things change over time. So
well, I'm excited to dig into that, but before we do, I just wanted to kind of dig into you a little bit. I want to get to know you a little bit more personally.
Okay.
And let our viewers get to know you as well. Because you got some interesting things here. So I understand you like football and you're a big Buccaneers fan.
Absolutely, yeah. It's been finally a couple good years for us.
Yeah.
After a long time of misery, so.
Yeah. So where do you see the 25 of football season going?
I'm an eternal optimist, Doug. I think there's only one place for us to end up, and that's on top. So, we'll see how next season goes and how the first 17 weeks go. But I'm optimistic. I think we're finally a new kind of franchise, because most of my life, I still remember, I was young enough to still remember the first Super Bowl back in 2001, 2002. But it was pretty ugly as a football fan. And, I don't think many football fans or many sports fans in general could have stood up another almost 20 years of their life. Best parts of their life, too, dealing with really up and down seasons, mostly downs. But we're finally, the last 4 or 5 years have been a real treat as a Bucs fan. And I have an 11-year-old son, so I joke with my wife when he was born. I was like, should we make him a Boston fan? I was like so taboo to say, but I was like, really, I don't want to put him through this misery, this torture. But I'm so happy that we kind of turned it around right when he was young enough or old enough to really appreciate it. He remembers our Super Bowl back in 2020, and since he just started playing tackle football for the first time. He's done flag for the last few years, and he finally said, "Hey, Dad, I want to do tackle football." And that was something that was very tough for me, because I grew up playing football my whole life. It was always my true love. I played lots of sports growing up, but I didn't want to push that on him, because especially with all the CT and concussions, I was like, last thing I want to do is force somebody that is healthy, is smart, and put him into a situation that could detriment to his health. But when he said that to me 3 months ago, I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest day of my life. So, and now we're doing that. So it's football is everything to me. And I'm happy to see he's joining that bandwagon too. So
Sure. Did you play football then growing up?
yeah, I played since I was about 8 or 9. So about his age, a little bit younger. And I played it all through high school. Unfortunately, I grew fast and I never got much bigger. I was about this size in 9th grade and I never grew after that. So my chance of going beyond high school was, I didn't get many offers, and by many I meant 0.
Yeah.
But then I focused my attention to school and education. I went to USF. I got a finance degree and ended up coming back and work with the family. Wasn't my first choice. I don't think insurance is anybody's first choice. You don't wake up as a 17-year-old kid like, I can't wait to become an insurance agent. But family has always been one of my first choices. So when I got out of school in 2012, I was like, what do I want to do with my life? And honestly, it seemed like an easy choice, but in hindsight, it was the right choice to go back and work with my family because, it's a great industry. And that's one thing that attracted me with insurance in general. It's one of the few products that I was able to see the positive long-term into. You could sell something and you don't have to sell it necessarily again. It just builds and continues to build. And then my dad became very successful over the course of my life doing it. So I was like, okay, well, if he did it, and I think I'm at least half as smart as he was, I could probably do it too. And sure enough, I think I'm, getting to about being as smart as he is at this age. But it's something I saw a lot of potential in. And more above everything else, it's like if you can't do something you love to do, which I don't think anybody truly loves to do insurance. If they tell you that, that's not necessarily true. There's no way.
Yeah.
But if you could do it with people you love to do it with, then, you'll never work a day in your life. That's kind of my new motto as far as doing something like insurance with the family. So,
I hear you, man. And I am total admiration of that and your family doing it together because Lona and I have wanted our dream is our kids get in the business, and they show no interest. And I don't blame them.
Give them time. I didn't either. I went to college to get away from the burden of the family business, and give them time. It's something that doesn't hit you right away. And sometimes, even once I came back and worked with the family, I still wasn't sure for probably a year, am I doing the right thing? And I looked at jobs. I went for school as a finance major. When I was going to school as a finance major, part of it was with insurance because a lot of it is insurance and financial intermediaries. But a lot of it was to, I was thinking, okay, I want to be a stockbroker. I want to be on Wall Street, Again, the more I started learning about that, and I went for accounting for a little bit. I ended up falling back into finance because I realized, I don't really like accounting anymore than I like stockbroking and finances. So ultimately, that's where I settled on family because I do like family. I do like my family. I'm blessed to have one of the coolest families I imagine you could have. And so working with them became a good idea or a no-brainer. But it still took some time to settle on me as, hey, this is really going to be my career for the rest of my life. So, and I'm happy I did because through all the ups and downs in the industry, I've learned a lot as a person, as a man, and as an agent, And I'm happy you have me on the show today because I can't wait to answer any questions you guys have because it is a hot topic. I talk to clients all day, every day who have tons of questions, some good, some bad. But there is a lot to know about the industry and where it's going and where it just came from because it's been pretty ugly the last 5 or 6 years.
I would say outside of, that's the number one question or questions are always surrounding the topic of insurance outside of, where's a property located? They always want to know where the boating access and things. And then the follow-up question is, what is insurance going to be like? And here recently, we've had a lot of clients say, well, I don't want to be in a flood zone. Well, that limits things a lot, right? And I think obviously a lot of that has to do with the cost of insurance rates or the fear of their homes flooding. And I think you can definitely provide us some answers regarding all that stuff. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So what do you think about Baker Mayfield?
I think he's the truth, and I am so sad for all the Browns fans. My dad's actually originally from Cleveland, so he's now more of a Bucs fan than Browns fan, but I don't know how they let him go, man. He is really, really good. And I think he's only getting better. I think he's going to be one of those quarterbacks we look back on a decade from now and say, man, where did that guy come from? I'm saying he didn't really, he had some flashes early on, but how did he go from being mediocre, above average at best to being a Pro Bowler, And again, I really think he's good enough to take us to a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Now it takes a little bit of luck to get through there healthy and win one, but I think he's good enough to do it. I really, truly do.
I was super excited. Super excited. He was a Brown. He played for the Browns, right? I'm a Cincinnati Bengals fan. So when you talk about the pain that you felt, being a Buccaneers fan. By the way, I'm a Buccaneers fan too, but that's kind of my second team, right? Team. They're local, and how can you?
Florida, you got to jump on someone's bandwagon.
100%. And so I follow him loosely and things like that. But watching Baker when he first, like how big of a deal it was when they signed him. Remember how big of a deal it was? And like all the commercials he did. How could you not like the guy?
He's
personality-wise?
That's the thing, too, I'll say, besides just his play on the field, is he, even if you don't like the Bucs, even if you don't like, anything about football, you watch a couple plays that he's made, and it's just like, you got to love the grit, I mean, he is one of the most determined players I've seen. And I just watched Tom Brady for 3 years, which was a true treat as a Bucs fan. I mean, I remember there was a play in this last playoffs. We ended up losing, unfortunately, against the Washington Redskins off a doink field goal. But there was a play where it was a big third down. I think it was like 3rd and 17. And he took off scrambling. I mean, no chance. I mean, 17 yards from a guy that can barely, I mean, he's, not the most athletic, prototypical scrambling quarterback. And he ran and he scrambled and he juked the guy. And then he runs over Bobby Wagner, who's one of the best linebackers. I mean, trucks him. I mean, you could tell. I wish I had this close-up on Bobby Wagner's face because he must have been like, oh, my God, what just happened? Like,
yeah.
And he got the first down. I mean, but that kind of play on the field is just, how do you not love that, And off the field, too, like you said. I mean, he's been in commercials. He's a hard person to dislike, I think, which is fun. It's fun to root for people like that. So.
It is, but I was not supposed to like him because he was a Browns quarterback.
It's hard not to, though.
And then he started having those low seasons or whatever, and people start questioning him, and then he's kind of like, oh man, he's, for lack of a better term, he's turned into a bum. He's not going to be able to make it in NFL. He's too small or whatever. Speaking of hate, just for fun, I pulled up, a bunch of headlines on Baker Mayfield. And like just kind of figuring out like what people were saying about him. And check this out. These are the headlines right now, by the way. So you're like saying, he's going to take you to the Super Bowl. What are the hate is Bucs QB Baker Mayfield ranks number 1 in the weirdest category. Bucs lacking at quarterback. So if you go and you search Baker Mayfield right now, the headlines are all like.
But I'm telling you, watch what he does with that. He's the kind of guy that, look, there's a reason why a lot of quarterbacks do what he did to where they get drafted high, first over. Look at Jameis Winston. Drafted high, all the talent in the world. Don't do well, don't live up to their expectations of being this Heisman Trophy winning, next sensation to the NFL. And then they get on that second contract, they don't re-sign with their team, and then they just kind of flounder and maybe at best become a journeyman. For him to do what he's done is not, it's unusual, and that shows the other half of the battle. It's not Jameis Winston, for example, one of the most talented quarterbacks that we've ever had on our team. I don't know if he had it up here, mm-hmm. and it goes to show. I mean, but Baker seems to be able to funnel that hate, funnel that chip on his shoulder, and put it into becoming better. And that's what happens. You either become better at whatever you do, as football, as a real estate agent, as an insurance agent. You either become better or you stay mediocre. And the only way you become truly successful is by being able to become better and learning from your mistakes. And he's able to do that. I think he's able to do that.
I don't think there's anybody that gets more hate than him as a quarterback. And you know what's funny?
Underrated for sure. He's definitely.
Well, yeah. I pulled up his rankings, and this is on NFL.com, by the way. He ranked over, 59 starting quarterbacks from 2024. And by the way, they said Lamar Jackson, number 1, Josh Allen, number 2, and my boy, Joe Burrow, number 3. Yeah, by the way, and if you look at Joe Burrow's stats, they're better than Lamar's. And
he had a hell of a year. He really did.
Insane. So how do they put him at number 3?
There's a lot of bias that goes on with these rankings. I'm surprised they put Baker at number 6 above Patrick Mahomes. But again, if they're basing off of just last year's stats, I don't know how they don't have Josh Allen number 1. Lamar Jackson did have a great year, don't get me wrong, but and Baker had a great year. I mean, on paper, you have 72% completion percentage. I mean, again, that's as far as getting better. He's been known as an accurate quarterback. He hasn't always shown that, but you guys are lucky too with Burrow. I mean, there's something about having a true franchise quarterback that makes a team special and fun to watch, Again, part of those dark 20 years of my life, we didn't have anything close to a franchise quarterback, and it's tough to watch. You guys are blessed. You guys have a quarterback that's going to be there for a long time.
But you got to build around him, and they got these big contracts now, man, right?
Yeah, it's a little scary with how much you guys are putting on the 2 receivers and Joe Burrow now. But, all it takes is a couple 3rd and 4th round linemen to pan out, and you guys will be all right. You guys need to build your offensive line to protect him. You know, if you can do that, that's one thing Baker got blessed with. We have a GM that is fantastic at putting those third and fourth round off-school tackles into a guard or tackle position that 2-3 years down the road, the guy gets paid, goes somewhere else, and they just put this low-budget guy in there. And you know, I've always been jealous of teams that have done that well, like Baltimore and New England back when they would have these all-pro guys that were like, this guy was drafted in the 5th round. Where did this guy come from? I mean, Philadelphia. I mean, look at their offensive line. I think they have maybe one in like the 1st round, but the rest of them are like 4th, 5th round guys or journeymen that they just, you know, but all it takes is finding the right offensive line coach and the right GM to put that together. And then all of a sudden you guys are golden. So
Yeah.
you have all the other pieces. You just got to hope that Joe Burrow can get the offensive line and play some time, you know?
100%. One thing kind of struck me, what you said earlier, you said you're coaching your son now in football, right?
Yeah.
And CTE was a concern of yours. And it's funny that you mentioned that. I've had probably around 20 concussions in my life. Now, it wasn't from football, but it was from different things. Like it started off, I got kicked in the head by a horse when I was a kid.
Oh, wow.
And then from there, once you get that first concussion, especially if it's a major one like I had, they're easy to get, right?
To get, yeah.
So we're a football family too. My son played football, and that was also a proud moment when he said, I want to play football. And that kid was good at football, and he loved it. And I never seen more focused kid on the field. And I'm not just saying that because he's my son. He really, really good.
Something to be proud of for sure.
He played in college a little bit, and then he just kind of fizzled out. He said, I don't want to do this no more. And now he's in construction, whatever. But now he tells me after the fact about the ringers that he used to get on the field and stuff, and he feels like it has some effect on him to this day. So it's interesting.
I definitely felt like I was smarter going into my junior year of high school than maybe going into my freshman year of college. It took a couple years off of football to kind of get my head right. You know, it was, again, it's something that back then, too, it wasn't really a thing. You know, I mean, back then you get a concussion, you go, coach goes, how many fingers are you holding up? You go, I think 4. And he goes, all right, get back out there, you know?
Right.
It wasn't until I was out of football that this whole NFL, you know, when this concussion movie came out with Will Smith. I mean, so it was after that it became a big deal and like this big issue with football. So there was a good time gap between obviously when my son was old enough to play, or, you know, say 6 or 7 years old, even old enough to get on the field and that. So I don't know. It wasn't I'm necessarily concerned with it because I know probably I don't know the statistics, but probably 1 million kids are out there practicing every single day. But it is something to be concerned with. And again, ultimately, I want that to be his decision. I don't want him to feel like there's a lot of parents out there that force their kids to play football. Maybe not the worst thing. You know, maybe it's better than alternatives for them, but it's something that I wanted to be his decision. So like you said, when your son said he wants to play football, same with mine. You know, again, part of me wishes it was a couple years earlier, but I'm happy that he came up to me and said that out of the blue. I was like tackle football? You know, flag football? You done flag? No, I want to do tackle football. I go, okay, well, it's the spring, but I can see if there's something going on. And sure enough, there was. So it was just like one of those things that kind of fell in part. And regarding coaching, I wasn't planning on coaching. I coached a lot of his sports growing up. I coached basketball, you know, biddy basketball, peewee, this, and a lot of his sports until a few years ago where my wife was like, hey, I don't want you to coach anymore because I think he needs a coach, not a dad out there. And I don't, you know, daddy ball him and nothing like that. But it's just to her point, I think also she was lonely on the sideline by herself. So I said, okay, fine. The next couple of years I'll take off. So I haven't coached him in a couple of years of different sports. And I think it's been good for him. I think it's been good to have an actual coach figure out there coaching him that isn't his dad. And then when this happened in the spring is a little bit more of a loose season. So there was only a couple of coaches out there to begin with on 20-something kids. So I said, you know what? Let me see if they need help. My wife goes, no, you're not going to help. And then the third practice, she wasn't at practice. And then the coaches happened to come up and have a parent meeting and said, hey, if any of you guys want to be team moms or help coach. And I just kind of reflexively stuck my arm up and said, hey, if you guys need help coaching, I can help. And honestly, it's been an awesome experience. I mean, I truly love football and being out there, especially because it's the same field I played Pop Warner on. Man, it's like just the smells and just the sights and the sounds. It's like it's all rushing back to me. And to see his face, and he's brand new at it. I mean, he's never done a contact sport, you know, in his life. To see his, you know, first year, like my first year, when I went from like, okay, am I actually supposed to try to hit this kid? Isn't that mean? And like try to explain to him, like, look, this is football. You're allowed to kind of hit. You know, you're allowed to be, I don't say mean, but you want to have a little bit of an aggression to you.
100%.
And it just kind of being able to be there on the field with him for that has been awesome. He just had his first game actually last week, and it didn't go so well, but we're still working on it though. But
that's okay, right? You learn more from the losses than you do the wins.
That's exactly what I said to the kids. You know, I said, look, you know, the scoreboard is reflective of what we do. We don't win the game on Saturdays. You know, we win the game Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I said, next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that's when we're going to win our next game. So you guys come with your heads prepared, be ready to work hard. And I'm very excited to see how they react this week, because there's nothing like that first practice after getting your butt whooped to really kind of get motivated. And I guarantee these kids, they're 11U, it's 11U. So it's a fun group. They're not babies anymore. They're young men. And to see how they play on the field, it's not like you're coaching young kids. I mean, you are coaching young kids, but they get it. You know what I'm saying? They understand. They're not just like, herding. I used to call coaching back when he was like 6 or 7, like basically herding duck or geese, just trying to keep them, hey, no, everybody straight line. Okay, here we go. Okay, line up. Or your turn. It's been a lot of fun. It's been one of the funnest experiences I've had as a dad.
And they get friendships for life, and they learn competition. They learn the failures. They learn to fail.
They learn a lot. Football teaches life. That's why I've always, I think, loved football. And my coaches, I had amazing coaches my whole life. I did, from Pop Warner to high school. And not just from an X's and O's standpoint, but from using football as an outlet for, Pop Warner was more life-focused. I mean, look, there's going to be times where you're losing and you need to get up and you need to keep fighting. There's going to be times where you're hurt or something hurts. You need to get up and fight through it. There's going to be times where, someone takes your job. But how you react to that is so important. You can either get mad and walk off and quit, or you can keep fighting for your job back. I mean, there's so many different comparisons to life as a whole. In high school, too. I mean, our high school coaches were fantastic. Again, maybe our high school team wasn't very good from an X's and O's standpoint, but from a life standpoint, I still take core values that I learned there and apply them to every day, So it's been a blessing to have that in my life, and I'm happy to see my son is welcoming into his life voluntarily, so we'll see where it goes. But
I love it. So what are you coaching? What's your position, like head coach or
offense and defensive line assistant? So we only have 3 coaches. The head coach is focused on offense. I told him, I played a lot of offense and defensive line growing up. I said, I can help with the offense, defensive line. He said, perfect. That's the one thing I don't really know too well. So I've been working on that. And then the other guy's more defensive coach. So we got the offensive head coach kind of doing all the offense as a whole, micro. So I'm more micromanaging the lines, and they got the offense and defense kind of as a whole. So it's only 3 of us out there. I wish there was a couple bit more, but apparently the fall, that's when they usually get their full staff. Spring is more of like a looser program that they're running.
Discover Community Lending, founded in 2014 in Lee County, Florida, under the leadership industry veteran Deanna Adinolfo Rivera. With over a decade of experience, Deanna and her team have earned more than 3,000 local 5-star reviews, reflecting their commitment to exceptional service. Dedicated to enriching Florida communities, Community Lending actively supports local nonprofits through donations of time, talent, and resources. Believing that homeownership is the key to generational wealth, Deanna strives to help families navigate the mortgage process with ease. Let Community Lending make your home financing journey simple and hassle-free. And that's why we recommend Community Lending. Our clients love them.
Now I want to know, I'm a fisherman, but I'm more of a spear fisherman. I like to scuba dive and do that kind of stuff. But I understand you do some fishing.
I do. I'm usually more on the boat and not too far offshore. It sounds like you're probably going a little ways offshore. So
when I get to go,
yeah,
I haven't been able to go for a while, and I'm missing it. But
amen to that. I haven't been out maybe twice in the last couple months, and that's like a long time for me. So
yeah,
it's definitely been it's been a weird winter. It's cold for very long, and that definitely makes ideal fishing situations a little tougher, especially as we've been fishing longer and longer. It's like, is it really worth going and freezing our ass off all day to maybe find and maybe not? So it's definitely tougher in the winter, but we're getting into the golden, to me, my favorite time of year to fish, which is spring. Fall for a lot of people, spring, I love spring. So we're getting, because this is when you get the tarpon, and this is when the real excitement starts to begin. So,
well, that's what I was going to ask you. So you're an inshore fisherman, right?
Yeah.
So is that what you like to target most, is tarpon, or what do you like to target when you go out?
When you can target them? I mean, this time of year we're getting into the tarpon kind of heyday time of year, which it's definitely a good time to start targeting. If you've never fished for tarpon and done inshore fishing, you got to at least try it. I mean, even if it's worth going out with a guide, because there's a lot of amazing guides around our area. Because if you fish offshore, you've caught big fish, so you've felt it. But there's something different about catching 100+ pound fish in 6 feet of water. I mean, they aren't. You're not just digging them out. They are running, they're jumping. It is like, and it's just like you got something different on the end of your line. It's not just like a 25, 30 inch snook or even a 40 inch snook. it's special. That's my favorite time to fish the year is for sure spring, because not only do you get the snook, you get the redfish, you get the trout, you get all the other game fish that you could want, but that's what makes a day. And the days where you've caught all 4 of them, those are special days, so.
Tell me about all 4 of them. What do you mean?
So they call it a grand slam, where, inshore slam in our area, it typically is snook, redfish, and trout, so you get, slot redfish, slot snook, slot trout, which isn't always easy, but it is something you can do most times a year as long as you got snook and, snook around. But the grand slam, like the Holy Grail, is called the grand slam. That's where you get a snook, redfish, trout, and then a tarpon. And I've only done it once.
In one day?
Yeah, in one day. And it is incredibly hard to do. We've had days where we've caught a tarpon and caught a redfish and caught a snook, and then the trout, which is the easiest one, is ever elusive, and you spend hours out there on the flats and it just won't bite. I mean, we've had a couple days like that, which are always like, wives are calling us like, hey, where are you guys at? Like, we're coming in right now. We're like, we got to get a damn trout. We've had one of my buddies has been snaked by that twice. And yeah.
Say what?
He's been skunked with the trout. I mean, he's had, we've gone out a couple times where we go out of all kinds of different spots, but we go out of, one of our favorite spots to go out of is Burnstore Marina, because you come right in Charlotte Harbor. You have everything to the south of you. You can go up north into Bulls and Turtle Bay. But a lot of times you come out of that harbor, there'll be tarpon there rolling, especially this time of year. So we've come out some days, immediately gotten the tarpon right off the rip. And so then it's like, oh, this is easy. Now we just got to get the snook, redfish, and trout. And again, twice in the last couple of years, he's gotten the tarpon right away. One was off Topwater, which was a hell of a fun show. Got the snook, got the redfish. And we spent like 3 hours on every flat we could find looking for a trout. And again, if it wasn't for our wives all blowing us up, I mean, it was like probably like 6 o'clock at this point. We're like, we're going to stay out till sundown, And I'm like, man, I think we finally got to call it. They're going to kill us. So we've had to give up a couple times on that. But
how do you soothe that over? You bring fish home to them or anything, or what?
Yeah, something. Well, it's been tough. A couple years ago, you couldn't keep a lot of game fish. So yes, that helps sometimes. Some black and redfish definitely soothes. So come home, cook dinner for them, some fresh fish. That definitely helps. A couple times, it's just one of those things. It's better to, I guess, ask forgiveness than permission. So, babe, forgive me. But it just depends, But most of the time, we're usually just going for the typical game fish. This time of year, usually when we're going for tarpon, usually you're kind of dedicating the whole day to that. It's not just like, hey, we're going out for this or that. The days where we had the tarpon right away, it's like, okay, hot route, But most days where we go tarpon fishing, usually you're going out with that kind of in mind, because it is one of those days. It's a bit of a boring day for fishing in the standpoint. I mean, you're going out maybe jumping a couple if you're lucky, but that's kind of the focus of the day. And you'll spend 8, 9, 10 hours on the water to sometimes not even get a bite, But and they'll be rolling all around you. I mean, if you ever go to Boca Grande, it's insane. It's definitely an experience. Those days are really infuriating because they're everywhere. But usually you have your better luck, I feel like, hooking up actually out of the pass, somewhere on the flats, around the beaches. But, we've had days where they're rolling everywhere, daisy chaining, spinning, circling, jumping, and they just won't bite, And that's just like, they're the most frustrating fish to fish for, because you'll see them and they're so big and beautiful, but you'll throw it right in front of their face and they'll kind of look and then that's it. And that was your shot, And then if you do hook up one, it's like the chance of actually getting into the boat is also slim. I mean, that's why I count tarpon fishing and jumps, not really just, you're not usually getting into the boat and actually getting a picture with it every time. But if you even get it to hook up and get a jump, they count that as, a hooked fish. And so it's a different kind of count they do. Yeah. Versus if you lose a 25-inch or 35-inch snook, didn't get to the boat, didn't really count, Sure. Tarpon's a little bit different there. So
are you good enough that where you're in fishing contests and stuff?
Not yet. I've only been fishing for like hardcore fishing again for like about 6 or 7 years. I used to fish some as a kid, but then I got into sports and kind of got out of it. And then it wasn't until one of my buddies finally decided to get a boat 7 years ago to where all of a sudden it's like, hey, let's go fishing again. Next thing you know, we were kind of in the golf mix there, doing a little bit of golf and doing a little bit of this on the weekends. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, he got a boat. And then somebody else got a boat. And now everyone's got a boat. I still am working on my boat, but it's kind of tough to get a boat when everyone else has boats. Sure. It's a lot easier to deal with cleaning their boat afterwards and going fishing with them than have your own, especially because I'm not on the water. So it's the whole Cape Coral rule with the boat thing's kind of nutty. Yeah. But as far as fishing, I've only been fishing like hardcore for about 6 or 7 years. And yeah, I mean, we've talked about doing tournaments. We were supposed to, me, my dad, and my son actually were going to do a tournament. He lives on North Captiva now. Back in, I think this was November. And then I think it was a weird weekend. My mom got sick, so couldn't do it, It didn't work out. But we're going to start. That's kind of like the next, let's put our our experience to the test and see how we actually do. And again, depending on the day, I think we could do pretty good. There's some amazing fishermen out there, though. That's the thing that kind of spooks me off the tournament. Some of the people I fish with are like next level.
Yeah.
Next level. Like whispers. It's like they have like X-ray vision and they know what's going on under the water. It's insane.
I'll tell you, you're 6 to 7 years above me or ahead of me because I don't know how to fish worth a daggone, man.
You could just dive down there, right? I mean,
right.
So it makes a
But
little.
I can't shoot a tarpon. Or,
No,
or a snook.
I don't know if you'd want to. That'd be a hell of a ride. But
Yeah.
it's definitely worth it. I'm telling you, man, get on a charter one of these. Some of the good ones you got to book like a year in advance, but you go out and it's an experience. I'll tell you, it's an experience, man.
Well, what is your dream fishing trip?
Dream fishing trip, I would say, is probably going to be going down to the Keys. I haven't fished for them yet, but I've heard they're a blast. Is bone fishing. So bonefish I've seen some people catch them, in Miami on this coast a little bit, but they're much more prominent in the Keys and down in like the Bahamas, Caribbean. Bone fishing is apparently like unlike anything else. It's like the holy grail of like game fishing as far as like smaller fish goes, because they apparently fight pound for pound insane, and they're very, very hard to hook into. So a lot of people fly fish for them. That's going to be something that once I'll call it master the spinning reel. Yeah, I'd like to learn fly fishing because that's a beautiful art. But a lot of people go down there in the flats. The nice thing in the Keys is you're in like 2-3 feet of the water fishing for them. Everything's crystal clear, and it's just you and one other person on a pretty small boat, and you're just fly fishing for them. Or again, you can use spinning reel too, but fly fishing just looks so cool. So I'll get there one day.
I had no idea people fly fish down there. I thought that was a river thing.
No, so fly fishing that's another thing I'd love to do too. So that's like the next frontier fishing for me. I'm not there yet because again, I still have, as much as I fish, there's so much to learn. It's just every time you go out, you learn something new. And when you go out with people that have been doing this for 30, 40 years, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I never thought to do that.
Sure.
As far as the fly fishing goes, yeah, a lot of people go tarpon fishing on fly, and that's something like insane. So, I mean, I can't imagine catching a 150-pound fish on fly reels.
No kidding.
That's very lightweight stuff. It's not like a big, heavy rod with, 50-pound braid on there that you're just kind of horsing it in. A lot of finesse to it. So
yeah.
That's on the bucket list. Bonefish or even tarpon fishing down in the Keys on fly would be really, really cool.
That makes me think of, when you go out to like USEP or Cabbage Key or whatever, and you see the old pictures of tarpon, the guys that used to catch it. Now, they didn't have the fishing technology that we have now. Probably not the same kind of fishing lines and
nothing. It's
things
evolved
like that.
so much. There's technology has completely changed just in the last 20, 30 years. I mean, a lot of it's similar, but there's even lures nowadays are insane. But it's changed a lot. And then again, what the next 20 years holds. I mean, technology, everything's evolving so fast, but fishing is one of the things that's changed a lot. And I can't imagine where it's going to be when my son is my age.
Sure.
And that's another thing too. I fish a lot with him. Something I think he hated me for when he was a little bit younger, and a little, attention span for a 7-year-old isn't what it is for a 10-year-old or 11-year-old. But he loves going now. And I think this was my birthday last year in November. We were fishing because that's what I always want to do for my birthday. I said, let's just go out fishing. So we were fishing out there, and I was talking about the slam earlier, redfish, snook, trout. He was actually on the verge of getting his first unassisted slam. He had caught his own snook, casted it, baited it, everything, his own redfish, and all he needed was a trout. And he was using an artificial lure because he actually called them all an artificial, which was a lot of fun. And we were, getting ready. My mom was with us. She's like, all right, I'm ready to go. And he goes, hey, Dad, can I get one more cast? And I was like, can you repeat that, please? Because it's usually me going, one more cast. When are we going home? One more cast. And he goes, Dad, can I get one more cast? And I go, oh, okay, one more cast. And he gave him a few more casts. And he ended up getting the trout,
Nice.
He had a nub of a lure because his pinfish and pufferfish were tearing it up, but he had a nub of a lure and he caught the trout, and it was a great moment. That was one of my favorite birthdays in recent memory. So
that's amazing. So let's dig into some insurance stuff. Why we have you on here?
Stuff, right?
Yeah, let's get into some fun stuff here. Talk about insurance. Everybody wants to know about the rates, right? I think that's probably the biggest thing regarding insurance is people's rates doubling or tripling or whatever. Quadrupling. What is going on in the insurance market to this point?
Yeah, to this point. So let's rewind back to when rates were good 7 or 8 years ago. I mean, you could insure a brand new house for $600-$700 for the year or less, and then rates, then we had Irma, which started off this trend of bad hurricanes, and reinsurance rates go up. And I'll get to reinsurance rates and their effect on the industry in a minute. So 17 happened, Irma. People thought rates were going to double overnight. They didn't, actually. For a couple of years, they were still pretty much flat, maybe 10, 15% increases, which is normal. Then around 2018, 2019, that's when we started seeing people's rates go up 30, 40, 50%, some doubling. And at first, everybody wanted to blame the hurricanes. And yes, it was, because there was a slew of hurricanes from 17 after Irma up until obviously Ian, which was like the cherry, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. But it's not just the hurricanes, and again, DeSantis mentioned it as far as the entire nation being up on insurance. It's not just Florida hurricanes. The reason why we're affected by it more is because we're on that Gulf Coast. We're affected by 2 different bodies of water, which means we can get hit from both directions from hurricanes. So we are more prone to hurricane damage than most other places on just the Gulf. But what really drives insurance rates when it comes to hurricanes in general, but just insurance in general on the entire Gulf Coast, is the reinsurance costs. So think of it like you buy insurance on your home, right? Because you can't afford to lose a $500,000 or $1 million property, right? No one can afford to lose that or really want to lose that. So they insure it. Insurance companies to do business in Florida have to have reinsurance, especially in Florida, because you don't get many, AAA companies. Like we have Progressive at our agency, who actually is still not writing right now. But most companies that do home insurance in Florida, they're not, Allstate doesn't do it. Nationwide doesn't do it. USA has started again, but in small pockets. Farmers was in here for about 3 or 4 years, and then I actually called this the day they got in and saw their rates the first year. I'm like, they're not going to last long. They were here for 3 or 4 years and they're gone, because you just can't. These big companies come in because they want a piece of Florida, but they don't realize that there's no point they're trying to reinvent the wheel, and you can't reinvent the wheel in Florida because there isn't really a standard wheel in Florida for how to do homeowners insurance. So most of the companies in Florida are solely able to sell insurance based off of their reinsurance. So they buy $1 billion policy to cover their claims, and then they insure just like we would do a deductible, the first $100 or $200 million or $500 million, depending on their deductible. So the cost of those plans, as you can imagine, have to be insane. The cost of those plans, if you look at the correlation between our rate increases of 30, 40, 50% over those years where rates went up, are directly in line with the reinsurance costs going up. And that's affected not just us. Obviously, Gulf places like Louisiana is really bad. Texas has gotten really bad. A lot of those places, even Georgia's gone up. A lot of that Gulf Coast has gone up a lot, but nothing more than Louisiana and Florida. And it makes sense. Look where most of the hurricanes hit, So that's been the driving factor, is the reinsurance cost. And that's also why what DeSantis did a couple years ago with basically putting a fee and a fund away for Florida to kind of battle the reinsurance cost that companies could dive into or dig into if they, instead of just solely relying on the reinsurance, has helped stabilize that. And what's also helped stabilize is the last couple of years of insurance for Florida. We haven't had as many bad storms. We've had some bad storms, and we had Milton and Helene this last year. But those were more flood damage than hurricane damage. So as bad as the damage dollars were, a lot of that was flood, which gets thrown back on FEMA versus the actual homeowners insurance companies that were paying it out. So that didn't affect us as bad, or at least so far. I guess we'll see what the numbers do here in the coming years, because usually it's a bit of a delayed effect. But I don't think those are going to affect us as much. I still consider that a good year for hurricane. And if we have another one this year, I think we're going to have another good year coming here, potentially rate decreases, which is what companies, CEOs are talking about. I know DeSantis mentioned rates decreasing in this year and next year, and we're already starting to see that. Homeowners insurance this year, for the first time, we're not seeing $3,000 policies go up to $4,000. I mean, some do, but not a lot, or not all of them, I guess you could say. We're seeing some go from $3,000 to $3,100, or $3,600 to $3,650, or $3,900 to $3,700. It goes down. I mean, people are people that are going up $150 right now are ecstatic. They're like, "Oh my God, it's only $200 increase. That's not bad,"
right?
Because they've been so used to $1,000, $700, $1,500, $2,000 increases. So it's been a sigh of relief.
Okay, so let's dig into some insurance stuff, because a lot of our viewers, that's why they're here. They want to know all about this insurance stuff.
I don't blame them. That's the fun part of the conversation today, right?
Right. No, I've enjoyed everything up to this point too. But what's going on? Why have insurance rates skyrocketed over the last few years? What's going on there?
There's multiple contributing factors. The biggest one is reinsurance. That's the primary cost for these insurance companies. And if you look at the correlation between the cost for these companies to buy reinsurance, not just here, but all over the country. That's what DeSantis mentioned the other day as far as rising costs across the country. It is a direct correlation in Florida between a 30% increase this year in reinsurance and then a 30% increase to us as the homeowners. So that's a big factor. And factors like that, obviously the hurricanes. Litigation has been a huge one. Florida has more litigation than any other state, and it's not even close. I wish I brought something with that showing it, because it's like 90% of litigation throughout the country is in Florida. I mean, so, huge percentage.
I thought they outlawed litigation. I thought
No,
they weren't allowed to sue insurance companies or something.
So they changed the one-way lawyer fees to where it used to be, which I don't understand why. I guess to protect the consumer. It's always to protect the consumer. As bad as the insurance companies are, the laws are typically in our favor, which makes sense because how are we supposed to fight against the big guys? But it used to be basically where the insurance companies, if they lost, got stuck with everyone's lawyer fees. Now it's, even I think if they won, they technically still get stuck with lawyer fees. Now it's if they lost, it goes back to the actual homeowner. So
there can still be lawsuits and stuff?
There still can be lawsuits. And there still are. I mean, there's still, but it's not as, before it was I won't say there's no reason not to, but there was almost incentivizing the homeowner to sue if they weren't happy with the result because there was no risk to them,
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like, okay, do I really want to take on this risk?
That makes sense.
And that's ultimately where we are now, which is, again, it's, I won't say a good thing, but it's going to help the cost of homeowners insurance, cost of reinsurance for all of us. So it's, I think, a greater good.
Yeah, so the common sense thing is the more money that an insurance company loses, the higher our rates would go,
Absolutely.
right? So if they make a consumer, us, stop and think, is it worth it or whatever to pursue this, then maybe there will be less lawsuits. That's the theory, the thought process.
Yes, and yes, absolutely. And especially because a lot of these lawsuits, not saying all of them, but I'm sure a percentage of the lawsuits weren't necessary or weren't even maybe right or just, to where now it's like, if I'm really being wronged and something is terribly wrong, I am going to sue because that's what it's there for.
Sure.
Versus, hey, I only got 50,000. I wanted 150 or 350,000 or 700,000. So I'm going to sue because I think I can get it and the lawyers tell me I can. And there's no risk to me, so why not? So that's going to be a big factor there, I think, in the coming years. But like any of this, it takes time. It takes years for us to see effect, positive or negative. Even after Irma, there was several years of lag before rates started to go up. 17 was Irma. I don't think we started seeing rates increase till about 18, 19, maybe even 20. At least where, and still even there, it was every year after year, 30, 40% to where now rates have quadrupled.
Why is that? Why was there such a lag? Is there a reason for that?
I believe they have to assess the damages, they have to assess changes that are needed, also the reinsurance. I mean, so all these things take time for them to kind of put all together and say, okay, how, and the other thing too is something that actually my dad told me a long time ago, and at least I believe it to be true. A lot of what he tells me, I believe to be true. I don't know if it is, but insurance companies don't always want to be the first to increase rates, but they also don't want to be the last. They don't want to be the first because then all of a sudden they're not selling policies. They also don't want to be the last because that means they are selling policies in an adverse market. So they don't want to be at $1,000 when everybody else is at $2,500 because that's going to kill their loss ratios. There's a reason why everybody else is at $2,500 because the cost of doing business is higher, and yet they're taking on. And that's what happened with Ian. A lot of companies that did not increase their rates. That's why we saw over a dozen companies go out of business. It was nice as an insurance agent because people would call us and say, hey, you're paying $3,000, I can get you $1,200, $1,500. So it's nice to sell the policy and save the people the money. But then Ian happens, and the company that did not have the money to do it and was undercharging rates goes out of business. So
speaking of that, let's talk about that nightmare, like right there, where I heard so many stories, or maybe they're the same stories getting recirculated, but whatever. Like people saying my insurance company doesn't exist anymore. I think the term is insolvent, and then they didn't have reinsurance. Is that possible? Like, was there people that didn't get the money from their insurance company?
So there's companies that went insolvent, didn't have enough reinsurance, or didn't have, again, I didn't work with any companies that didn't have reinsurance. I can't speak on that. There's companies that went insolvent and just didn't have enough money to cover it even with their claims. And then what would happen is it goes to FIGA, which is the state. I will say this, those were not fun claims processes. Those were not fun for the client. They were not fun for us. I will say the vast majority of clients, and we have a lot of those people still, like UPC was a big one that we had a ton of clients with. The rates were absolutely insanely low. And again, nightmare of a situation. It took them sometimes a year or two to get everything taken care of. But now here we are, 3 years after the claims. Most of them did get paid though. So I've, at least I have our clients, and I'm not just saying this from experiences I've seen with our clients, they did get paid. FIGA was not a fun process, but it did pay out,
Okay.
And for the most part, they seem to do a pretty good job because, again, usually we hear when they don't,
What was the term? FIGA?
It's
FIGA.
It's basically a Florida insurance guarantee annuity. So it's designed to basically kick in when the company goes insolvent. Now, I don't know how long that would last if it would have kept going the way it is. So it's good these changes are happening at a state level and at a company level, but hopefully we don't have to go that route again. I'm hoping that they can make enough changes to get companies profiting again to where we don't run into a situation like that, because that was not a fun experience for anybody. So,
Are there still insurance companies pulling out of Florida?
not really right now. Most of the companies that have. I mentioned Farmers to you earlier. That was a company, again, one of the few AAA companies you get. You don't get many AAA companies in the state. Progressive is one that we work with that did not necessarily pull out. They pulled back, I guess you could say. Like, they stopped doing certain types of policy forms. They have not been writing homeowners since Ian, but they're supposed to start this year. But again, like many things in the insurance industry, I guess I'll believe it when I see it. But no, they've been a good company to work with. But Progressive, yeah.
And so they don't do homeowners, but do they just do car and auto, or
They have
whatever?
for the last few years. There are some pockets of builders, I think, like D.R. Horton. There's certain construct companies that were partnered with them, and they still were required to honor their deals and write policies for a couple of years. But for most of us as independent agents, we were not able to write them since basically Ian. They put a moratorium in place and stopped, restriction, like many companies will do after a storm comes near. They'll stop business, and they just never turned it back on, after Ian. So again, this year is supposed to be the year. A lot of companies, as I mentioned earlier, we're getting into a period where I think companies are coming back into the state there with a lot of litigation changes that we've talked about from the structure, the companies, what they're allowed to do, what they're allowed to charge, what they're allowed, the claims process. These changes have made it more favorable to insure in Florida. So we are actually getting the opposite. We're getting companies finally come back into the state. We have a couple of products this year, which has been awesome because they've been a lot cheaper. Some case, and I can't say that's been the case for like 7 years. I mean, It seems like it, but eternally might as well be. But we have companies that are coming in. It's like, wow, it's like this is a lot cheaper. It's like $1,500 less, $2,000 less. So I think we're getting to better times as an industry.
Well, let's get into that.
Yeah.
But before we do, I want to ask you about the insurer of last resort, Citizens, right?
Yeah.
How do people get funneled into that? When does that apply?
It's not necessarily how does it apply. So Citizens is a state-run program, and they're kind of like you said, they are a bit of a last resort. You're not we can't write Citizens under a lot of circumstances. So, for example, if there's other options in the standard market, they're within a certain percentage of premium, then we can't write it. Or if there is ones there within the right premium, there has to be a declination like, okay, they won't insure this kind of property, or they won't insure this kind of risk, or they have too many claims and they won't take it. So we have to be able to prove to Citizens to write it with them that, okay, this is the last resort, this is the last option. And for a few years, I mean, we never, as long as I was with the family, especially when I first got with us in 2012, 2013, we didn't write, we had Citizens, but we didn't write them. And it was partly because there was better options. And after Ian, I remember the year after Ian, Citizens was like the only company writing, period. So we wrote a lot of policies with them, unfortunately. I won't say unfortunately, actually they were pretty easy to deal with back then. But what they've done, because they realized that they were the last resort, and they realized that their rates, because they're capped on how much they go up year over year, they were the cheapest. There was times where we wrote people that were paying $5,000, $6,000 down to Citizens for $2,500. And it was the right thing to do. Even though it's a pain in the butt, the underwriting process as an agent is a pain in the ass, like a royal pain.
Yeah.
They were so much cheaper, it was the right thing to do. So we wrote, we probably tripled our block with Citizens in 2022, 2023, and the whole state did. They went from they were the largest insurance carrier going into 2024 in the entire state, and that was not their goal. So what they've done to push back is they've put a lot of wrinkles and changes. One you've probably seen, but maybe some houses with Citizens being the only option, is they require flood now on a property that's in the flood zone. And that's going to change every year to where in 2027, it'll be every property, whether you're in the flood zone or not, you have to have flood coverage with Citizens. So even if they are $3,000 less, if the flood policy is $4,000 for the year, which one are you going to go with?
I need to dig in on that. Did you just say everyone that's not in a flood zone? I'm not in a flood zone.
With Citizens, if you're with Citizens.
Oh, okay.
Only with Citizens. Now, some companies are,
Thank goodness.
Take a seat, take a breath. No, it's just with Citizens. So Citizens, and like right now, for example, I think this year they've kind of every year lowered the bar. So originally it was only properties in the flood zone the first year they did this a few years ago. And then it became everybody that was in the flood zone or not in the flood zone, but under or over 600,000. And then it was 500,000. So it's going to kind of trickle down to where in 2027, everybody that's not in the flood zone with Citizens, if you're going to be with Citizens, is going to require flood coverage. And they will not take your policy. They'll cancel you if you try to write it without it, or they'll not renew you if you cannot show and maintain flood coverage. So fortunately, this is coming at a good time, because when I first heard that, I'm going, oh my God, what are we going to do? Because keep in mind, we were writing every other policy with Citizens in 2023, 2022. And companies have come back into the market and opened back up, and guidelines have gotten better.
Okay, so you're talking about Citizens changing the flood requirements. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that again?
Yeah, so Citizens has put in requirements for flood coverage for properties that were in the flood zone a few years ago, and they've kind of tailed that down to where the first year was anybody in the flood zone was required to carry flood coverage just to be with them or to offer a renewal. And then the next year was anybody $600,000 or less, or I'm sorry, $600,000 or over. Then it was 500. So every year it's kind of tapered down a little bit to where it's going to go to a point in 2027 where everybody that's with Citizens flood zone or not is going to be required to carry it.
Okay.
But ultimately it's coming at a good time because the industry is getting better. I mean, there's more and more companies now to where Citizens isn't as, like we haven't written a Citizens policy in a few months, and that's a stark difference compared to 2024 and 2023. So hopefully, if the market keeps trending the way it is, we're not going to need to write Citizens except as a last resort, like it should be, and that's that was kind of their goal by doing that,
Let's talk about last resort as it relates to the age of a home. And from a personal experience, so we bought a home that's built in 1973.
Okay.
And so how does age play into the last resort? How did I get forced into Citizens at first? Now we're no longer on Citizens, and I think it was because we did upgrades. Tell me about.
So age is always going to be a huge factor. Like I was talking about with you guys earlier with the client you were working on, how I recommend, when he called us for insurance, he goes, which one do you think for insurance? I said the newer one. And because age is not only going to affect the price, it's going to affect the eligibility, and it's also going to affect the coverage options. The older houses, if you get 73, so anything after 30 or 40 years becomes harder to insure. Number one, companies just sometimes won't take it. Companies that will take it are going to cap or exclude your water damage, and that's a huge factor. But eligibility is the biggest factor. You're going to increase your cost because numbers are your friend. If you have 30 different companies to go to, there's a chance that one of those companies is going to offer you a better rate. If you get down to, say you have a house built in the 50s and it's like two options, well, one might be $6,000, one might be $8,000. So, and then the problem now is going to be if that's a $6,000 rate and that's with Citizens, what's the flood going to be?
So, regarding that, if you add a bunch of hurricane protection, like as an example, ours already had hurricane windows in it. We had a composition shingle roof before Ian, and that got destroyed during Ian. I think we had an older electrical panel and stuff like that, but we updated the electrical panel. We did the third nail.
That's a huge one.
Yeah, we did the third nail. We did a metal roof when we replaced it and things like that. And then I think that's when we had other options. Is that how it works on an older home? If you get hurricane protection, you can get off of Citizens, or
so not necessarily. So hurricane protection is more of a discount. The upgrades you're talking about to the electrical panel, plumbing, roof. Like there's 4 major points to a house to insure for eligibility besides just the age: the roof, AC or HVAC, plumbing, electric. So some companies, you could have a brand new roof, you could have brand new HVAC, you might have brand new plumbing, but if you have an old panel or an eligible panel, Citizens, again, comes the last resort. So if you update all of that, you should at least open yourself up to more companies. But again, that's based off of right now and things getting better. Mm-hmm. A few years ago, that wasn't the case. So it's going to be like anything. As the industry evolves and becomes more and more aggressive, I guess you could say, mm-hmm. more companies are going to want to take it. But opening protection, what you're referring to, windows and doors, that's more of a discount. The third nail, that's a discount. So that's going to help every company you're with, every policy you're with. And the age of roof matters more than the material, unfortunately. Now, roofers are going to hate me for saying this. I wish every roof in Florida was metal. If they did that, then I think all of us, for insurance at least, would be in a better spot because you wouldn't have to deal with a new roof for 30, 40 years.
I thought there was proposed legislation to make that a thing where everybody has to have a metal roof by a certain point. Have you heard anything about that?
I pray it goes through. Again, roofers, I apologize. But,
So they do metal roofs. I don't see what the big deal is. Just do a metal roof if they're a roofer, right?
As far as a Christmas party a couple years ago with one of my neighbors, me and him always is a love-hate thing because, back when roofers were causing issues with insurance companies, said we're basically like natural born enemies, right? And we laughed about it. But no, he's a really good guy, and he's actually one of the good roofers out there. But he told me, I asked him that question. I said, hey, why aren't metal roofs like required or standard? And he goes, I asked, wouldn't that fix the problem we have? And this was like right after Ian. And he said, this is the Christmas after Ian, and everything was still, we're all in the neighborhood picking everything up for months and stuff. But he said, yes, he goes, it would fix a lot of the problems I think you guys are facing with roofs. He goes, the problem is in 20 years, we'd be all out of business, because there'd be no more roofs to do unless you're a brand new construction. Because, you look at Ian, Shingle roofs were destroyed. Tile roofs, which was surprising to me. I always wanted a tile roof. I don't want one anymore. Tile roofs were destroyed. Metal roofs did really good, for the most part. And this isn't just coming from my observation of living here. This is coming from claims representatives I've talked to from companies, company marketing reps, a couple high up execs from companies I've talked to at the trade shows the last couple of years. We would love it as an industry for metal to become standard. But again, the problem with a lot of this, somebody saying something on the camera, I don't know. We'll see if it actually comes to fruition, but I hope it does. That would help everybody, I think, long
I don't
term.
know if it's true. I just thought I heard someone say that or whatever.
I heard that too recently. So
Okay.
I heard something about that. Now, again, there's a lot of, I'll believe it when I see it in this industry.
Sure.
So
I think that'd be a good thing. Like you said, observation-wise, just driving around Southwest Florida, there was maybe a couple roofs that are metal that I saw destroyed, and I think those were in Matlacha.
Yeah.
And they were like 100 years old already.
exactly.
That kind of thing.
50, 60 years old or something.
Yeah, really old roofs. I mean, you could see the rust on them type thing. But everyone else, like, for instance, in my community that had a metal roof, had no damage whatsoever. I mean, everybody that had composition shingle at least lost one or two shingles, unless they're.
I had a brand new roof before Ian, and I still had some damage. Unfortunately, it wasn't major, and I didn't push for a new roof because my neighbor I was talking about said, no, you don't need a new roof, you just need to patch it. And fortunately, the company was okay with that. And that's a whole other issue in the industry is patch roofs. But with metal, it's, even the ones, I had some that were, blew off a panel, maybe it was 15, 20 years old. You can put a new one on a lot of times, So it's not like a tile roof where you miss one tile or crack 5 tiles, the roof's shot because they can't match the tiles and they can't match the color. God forbid it's an association and need a whole new roof, All of a sudden that $5,000 job turns into a $105,000 job, which, like you mentioned earlier, gets thrown back on us as the homeowners insurer. So it's all cause and effect with this industry,
Yep. So how is, the current insurance system affecting like fixed income residents? Have you seen like a lot of your clients that are on fixed incomes, they're calling you complaining or needing help with the insurance?
Every week, yeah. And and that's actually a sad subject for me because I have clients that we've insured for over 20 years. They've lived here for a lot longer than that. Some have lived here since the 80s, the 90s, the 70s even. And this is their home. Some of these people are in their 70s on a fixed income, 80s on a fixed income. And we've had a lot of clients, we've had some literally move out of the state, which I don't know if it's going to be any better elsewhere. I mean, homeowners insurance probably is, but as far as cost of living in general, the last couple of years, we've had a lot of people cancel their plans. They don't, they've paid off their house 30 years ago, 20 years ago, so they haven't needed homeowners insurance. So they cancel their $7,000 plan because again, these houses that they've lived in for 40, 50 years are 1973s, 1982s, 1955s. They're older houses, so they're expensive as hell.
You know what's wild? I mean, because you grew up here, obviously, right?
Yeah.
In 1970s, house to you is old, but I'm from Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky. So anybody that's from up north, which is a lot of people, right? 1970s isn't an old house.
I know.
I mean, up
it's
there, it's way
beast.
older.
Yeah, it's a different beast down here for sure.
So do insurance companies just work differently up there? If age up there is different than age down here? Is that a thing? Do you know?
I think they probably do. But again, a lot of it has to do with the hurricane risk. The codes, there's so much that changed. It's not just the age of the house. It's the codes that have changed. Just from 2002, like one of the last major building code changes after the Andrew in the 90s, a lot of changes happened. They looked at houses. They kind of pulled up the roofs and said, pulled up the hoods and said, okay, why is this house still standing and this one's not? And they kind of said, okay, well, this. They put all this large numbers together. That's what the insurance industry loves to do. They love to put large numbers together and figure, okay, this is why this is happening.
Yeah.
And they make changes. And so much has changed in the last 25 years. I mean, you go back 50 years, it's like a completely different house. But what's crazy to me too, and I hear this a lot from clients. I hear this all the time from older house clients that are in the situation you're talking about, fixed incomes. Why is this so much? I can't afford this. They're like, well, this house has been here since 1973. It's still standing. Why is it so expensive? I mean, and in a way, they're right. The house is, I mean, I can't imagine how many storms it's been since 1973, but it's more than my house built in 2002. So why is my house more favorable? You know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's a question I can't answer.
That's exactly like the situation we're in. It's like our house is built in 1973, but I think that thing is built like a tank. I mean, it has drywall and then plaster over drywall, and they don't get damaged. The roofs did, but other than that, the homes
are standing.
Never flooded. I mean, there's like 3 homes out of 900. We got a little over 900 home doors in our community, and there's like 3 of them that flooded but they're actually in the flood zone. All the rest are on the canal, did not flood. So that was one of my fears, is why would everyone that doesn't have much damage get punished for what happened to everybody else that's in a higher risk thing, like, living on an island, for example.
So I just mentioned the large numbers. It's called the law of large numbers. So unfortunately, the smaller percentage affects the greater whole. So if you have, especially with something like FEMA flood, I mean, if you have 1-2% of the houses cause billions of dollars of damage, that affects everybody, because it's going to basically trickle. And that's with homeowners in general. But I mean, I have clients that haven't had a claim through Ian, through Irma. Why are they being affected? Because it's the greater whole that is affected by it. They have to charge everybody. That's kind of what the way insurance is designed to do, is everybody pays a premium into the bin. When something happens, then you need to dig out of it, you do. You're not really, I don't think you're supposed to make money off insurance. You're supposed to at worst break even over the course of your life. It's supposed to help you pay for that large loss you couldn't afford, that $300,000 loss, that $80,000 loss when you didn't have $80,000 lying around, But again, that has really been tested the last few years with how much premiums have gone up. I mean, for somebody paying $6,000 a year over the course of 15 years, what's $90,000? And that's assuming it's not going to continue to go up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, well, there's a good chunk of your house.
Sure.
So, so that's why some of these clients you mentioned that are retired on fixed incomes, that's the question they have to ask themselves. Is it worth me to save that $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a year and hope that if something happens in the next 10 years, it's not next year or the year after? And then I have money saved away. But, it's become a much harder question for those clients to answer versus 10 years ago when it's like, yeah, pay $1,000 a year for insurance because it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So that's a good segue into this video that I've seen of DeSantis that I wanted to ask you about. This came out within the last month.
Yeah.
And it was a press conference that he did, and just watch the first couple minutes and then, get your thoughts on it. Because everything that we've pretty much been saying sounds like bad news up to this point. But I think there's some relief coming, right? There's a bright spot.
There's a glimmer of hope.
All right.
I think there might be a rainbow at the end.
We'll see what you think about this.
Is doing a lot of good research, and we use modeling for different things we're doing. This affects different things that are going on in the state. So it's a great backdrop here. I am here to provide some updates on some of the major issues that are facing Florida, particularly with respect to insurance. I think we all have lived through the last 4 years and seen the cost of everything really go up. Groceries are more expensive than ever. Housing is more expensive than ever. Auto insurance was the #1 inflationary item nationwide in 2024. Average increase was 20%. And then, of course, property insurance has been going up nationwide, but that's been an issue that's roiled the state of Florida, being hurricane prone for many decades. And so I'm pleased to announce that very soon, Citizens Property Insurance will be announcing that 73% of Miami-Dade primary homeowners will receive a premium decrease in 2025. And
yeah, but Miami's definitely happy with that. They were the highest section of the entire state.
The average decrease for those Citizen policyholders will be 6.3%, which you figure 2024, we had inflation in 2024 overall. And it's accelerated at the end of 2024. So even if you just kept things normal, you'd likely see increases in a lot of these things. And yet, for Miami-Dade, 73% of those Citizen policyholders will receive a decrease, average of 6.3%. 52% of Citizens homeowners in Broward County will also be receiving a decrease, and that'll be an average of 4.5%. So overall, statewide, most of the decreases are concentrated in South Florida, but overall, a decrease will be merited for over 20% of Citizens policyholders statewide. So we
that matches what we're hearing
appreciate Citizens
from a lot of
doing
company
that.
reps.
I'm proud to be able to make that announcement today, and that's something that's
There's
very,
one other
very
part
meaningful.
that I wanted. He says about autos and auto.
Can also announce that the major companies who provide auto insurance in the state of Florida are also going to be providing premium decreases for 2025. So far the filings are as follows. Geico, 10.5% decrease statewide for auto insurance. Progressive, 8.1% decrease statewide for auto insurance and state.
So that seems like a glimmer of hope. What do you think about that?
So for the homeowners, a glimmer of hope for sure. We're starting to see some changes there, but I forgot to mention the auto. Auto has already started to. That's one very exciting thing about 2025 so far. And we kind of noticed that we've been told for years that rates are going to start dropping, but it's not until they start to that we start believing it. We noticed about halfway through January, end of January, we're just doing requotes like we always do, or new quotes for clients. We're like, oh, wow, this is a good rate. Because auto insurance, we talk about homeowners going up the last several years. Since the beginning of 2023, auto insurance has basically doubled in the state. I mean, I was paying, which was a very good rate at the time, $120 for me and my wife's car. Now I'm at like $250, $270. And I was able just to reshop myself with Travelers last month and got back down to like $170 a month. And again, I was one of the later ones to the party because we noticed with clients, we're quoting people there at $1,900. We're requoting them all of a sudden it's $900. We're quoting, and those are one of the better ones. But I mean, I would say about 2/3 of the clients we've requoted in our own agency, we've saved, 15, 20, 50%. I mean, between 15 and 50% probably.
Wow.
So that is already, that's, something he mentioned, but that has already started to happen. And that's been very exciting because for the first time in years, and I mean literally years, we could finally, I feel like, do our job, save people money, not just find them coverage or, keep them flat, which has kind of been the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. Hey, you're paying $2,000 last term. Now you're paying $25. Let me get you back to $2,000. Now it's like, hey, you're paying $2,000 last term. It's $22,000. Let me get you down to $15,000, And that's been that's when I joined the agency. That was the fun part, saving people money and feeling like a hero.
Yeah, exactly. My kids, I got 25, 21, and 18. Man, their insurance rates, holy moly, especially the boys. The boys are way more expensive than my daughter, right?
Yeah, and
they're safe drivers.
I was going to say, I don't really get the statistics with the guys versus girl things, but apparently they're a lot cheaper. They are. I don't know how an 18-year-old kid without a family to support them would do it nowadays because it's insane.
Yeah.
You see how much it is, but it's insane.
Yeah, they're working just to afford their car and their insurance, basically, is what it boils down to. But
absolutely,
there's a glimmer of hope. And so, are you thinking that? Because he just mentioned Citizens there, right? Is the decreases, which caught my attention, but I'm like, what about the other companies that like Progressive?
So Citizens is very prominent on that coast because Miami's always kind of been the redhead step. The Tri-County area over there has always been the redhead stepchild of the industry as long as I've done this, and even before I was in the industry, according to my dad and Jessica, who's been there longer than I have. But the rates there are more expensive, but a lot of it has to do with the numbers I was talking about. Your numbers of your friends when we're quoting you or quoting you, period. If you have 20 different options with 20 different companies, there's a chance you're going to have a better rate versus you have 2 or 3 options. And in Miami, a lot of times, because it is older houses a lot of times, you talk about up north, Miami is one of the older areas in Florida as compared to over here at least. Mm-hmm. So you don't get many options. A lot of times it is Citizens. A lot of times it is a 1955 house. And Citizens is the only option. So that's why he's probably focusing on that side. They've always been more expensive. But it's going to be as an industry. So that's good to hear Citizens is following suit there. But if they're following suit, other companies are going to follow too because it becomes a competitive game. They don't want to be, like I mentioned earlier, you don't want to be the first person to always lower rates, but you don't want to be the last.
Sure.
So
that makes sense. So how much do you think their policies, you think that the Florida, policies that DeSantis and the government have put in place are what's driving all that, or?
A huge factor. A lot of if he didn't put some of these things in place the last couple of years, I'm serious when I say this. I was concerned for the career choice I made. I mentioned earlier I thought that I made the right choice by joining the family. I was really concerned because we were down to one company after Ian. I mean, if things did not get better in a hurry, I don't know what companies would have been crazy enough to jump back in. So the fact that they put these things into effect in place so quickly may have saved the insurance industry, and that directly affects so many industries. You guys, I mean, how do you sell a home if you can't get insurance on it?
Sure. Yep.
How do you own a home even if you don't have a mortgage on it if you can't insure it? So it was very scary for a while there to think what was going to happen, and they've definitely made an impact, a big impact.
So are we talking 3 to 5 years from now? Or are we talking we should see some changes here pretty quickly?
I think less. Year. I think less than that. The X factor there is going to be what happens from June to September this year.
Yeah.
So everybody make sure you do your rain dances to keep the storms away. But if we have another good hurricane season, I think we'll see impacts as soon as next year. Maybe not 20, 30% decreases, but enough new companies coming in saying, okay, hey, it's like I always kind of compare, this is my analogy, but I always said companies are like crabs on the beach. The surf comes in, they get scared, they run away. And then the surf comes out and they go in, they pick everything apart, say, hey, it's looking good. Right now, the surf is just crashing and crashing and crashing. But we're finally getting some relief to where if we get to a point here soon to where, we had 2 good hurricane seasons for the most part as a whole the last 2 years. We have a third one. Companies are going to come in. They're going to start lowering their rates. Other companies are going to have to compete, so they're going to start lowering their rates. It becomes a competitive market again. So I think, again, a good hurricane season this year, I think 2026 is going to be a very good year, or at least a better year. And if, again, God forbid you have 2 in a row, please God, 2027 would be, yes, I think it's much closer to 2 or 3 years versus 3 to 5. But we'll see how storm season goes the next couple seasons.
He also mentioned certain, like 11 carriers have came back into the state. Have you felt that?
We've definitely had some new companies the last couple months. Again, a couple of them too have been pretty cheap, which again kind of reinforces what I was just saying. Some companies come into the state, they want to buy business, so they are, we have one company that's basically a sister company of other companies it's already working with, and they are by far our cheapest product right now. It's like even, I just did one the other day, it was like $1,700. Their other they're actually, the client we had was with their sister company, paying $2,700. So it's $1,000 less for essentially similar, almost exact same coverage. And that's going to happen. That's what was happening when I first jumped in with the family. When I just first jumped in with the family in 2012, 2013, it was coming out of something similar to this. Not quite as bad, but after, Charlie and the slew of hurricanes we had in the mid-2000s, it was really bad. Rates were flying up, and then they started to come down. And I got in right at the good times where it's like, hey, this is fun. I get to save people money every year. And so it was a rude awakening for me in 2020. I'm like, oh, this sucks. But yeah, it's going to start happening. And that's what was happening. We had new companies coming in every single year. You get on with a new company, all of a sudden you're selling every policy because no one's beating it, And we're starting to get a glimmer of hope of that, We'll see what happens next year with storm season, though.
Awesome. What I want to talk about now is what homeowners and buyers need to know about insurance. And I think it's good to start off with a very popular subject, which is assumable policies. So I want to pick your
insurance.
Yeah, for flood insurance. So I want to start there.
All right.
Pick your brain on that. Tell me about assumable policies and what they are, and let's go.
So this is something that wasn't really a thing before a few years ago. FEMA changed a lot of their rating guidelines. They came out with their new 2.0 system, which has been a lot of fun. Sarcasm. They changed the rates to where there's no more. They're all actuarial rates now. So when you go get a flood policy now, even if you're not in the flood zone, it could be $3,000-$4,000. Or if you're in the flood zone, you could be at $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 very easily. And this isn't just on the beach. This could be in Cape Coral. This could be on the canal. This could be on the river. So a lot has changed with assumable policies. Well, not a lot has changed, but a lot has been brought up about assumable policies. And we get that question all the time with new prospective clients that call us for homeowners. So say somebody calls us for a new home quote, and they always ask about homeowners. Some ask about flood right away, and they say, well, do you know if the current homeowner has a policy now? And that's always something that most time they don't know. So they lean back on you guys, the realtor, to try to help figure out that information. So basically what an assumable policy is if you have a FEMA policy, and FEMA's a standardized product through any company. It could be USAA, it could be Hartford, it could be Allstate, it could be Progressive. There could be 100 different products that say a name of a company, but if it's NFIP, which is National Flood Insurance Program, it's a FEMA policy, and therefore it is assumable, meaning that new person that's buying the house can assume that policy one of several ways. So assumable, a lot of times people think the common way that we used to do is you basically take it over, you transfer it, which is like the only policy you can transfer. Most times ownership changes. You can't just take over that policy, whether it's your son, your brother, a complete stranger. You can't just take over. It has to be rewritten. Well, with FEMA flood, you could. But there's a couple ways to do it, though. So I'm sure you've probably seen this with some of your clients being a hot question, right? Mm-hmm. So assuming it as a transfer is one of the easier ways and one of the common ways we see it a lot of times. That's basically where the new buyer takes over the flood policy at the current rate, which is a lot of times a lot cheaper than the brand new policy, but that has to be transferred and has to be accounted for during the closing there because that policy never cancels. The money that was gone into that policy, say it was a $2,000 premium, if that seller transfers that policy, they don't get a refund. And then they call us in a few weeks and say, hey, how come I never got a refund? And it's happened, probably more than you imagine. It happens a lot because it's something that wasn't really common until a couple years ago. An easier way to handle it, I think, for you guys as the realtor, as the broker, as the title company, is to rewrite it as a new policy, but with the prior rate. And all you have to do that is get a copy of that declaration page. And we can basically take that policy, put the policy number into the FEMA system, and it'll say, hey, this is their rate, and it basically takes it over. But this has changed because when I bought my house in 2014, it was a lot different. You could grandfather back then, and that's why these assumable policies make sense. Like, I bought my house in 2014. It's right across the street from the river. One reason why I got it so cheap back then was because flood was $5,000 a year. And everybody that kept looking at it saying, oh, great, homeowners is $700, flood is $5,000. No, thank you. And eventually I got to it when I finally got my bid accepted. And I'm like, okay, what's the problem here? Is it Chinese drywall? Is this? Oh, and it's flood. And I kind of chuckled, like, oh, that's it? And again, me and Jesse got it down to like $600-700 for the year. That was it. And it's gone up a little bit, especially the last few years. But, back then you could grandfather a plan because when it was built in compliance at the time in 2002. So even though the flood maps have changed, it didn't matter. You could prove to FEMA that, hey, at the time this was built, it was built a foot above the base flood at the time. And you could do that back then. You can't do that anymore. So that's why these assumable policies have become so important, because if you have current flood insurance now, being able to sell that house with $1,000, $2,000 flood policy when the flood will be $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a year for that new buyer is very attractive. It's very attractive. That's saving them. Well, if you're talking about $4,000 difference, that's $40,000 in 10 years.
It's crazy.
It's huge.
Right. Yeah.
So how often do you see that, by the way? You know?
Pretty often.
Yeah.
Now it feels like it's almost on every deal. Now I've had people tell me it's not assumable. Is there a case where?
So I mentioned NFIP FEMA. If the policy is a private company, it's up to their discretion, and their discretion the last couple of years has not been very kind. So we've had a lot of policies like through Neptune, through Beyond, to where a very good rate, and the problem is it has to be rewritten. Now, sometimes that's not a bad thing, assuming that they're still writing, because what's happened is maybe we wrote that policy 4 years ago, and it was the cheapest rate at the time, and now they're not writing. After Ian, a lot of these private markets, after Ian said, no, we're not going to do it in this zip code, basically most of Cape Coral for that matter now in the flood zones. But we still get some companies that do it, and it's not too bad. But that becomes a problem if they have a private flood policy.
Well, I had no idea. 'Cause you're using the term rewrite, so I just want to make sure that everybody else is clear, because I wasn't. And when you say rewrite, first off, let me back up. When you talk about assumable, I assumed that when my buyer buys the home that they're automatically doing business with that seller's insurance company, but you're using the term rewrite. So in other words, I could take refer my buyer to you and the policy switches over to you, or how does?
So if we do a flood transfer, then yes. Just say for example, seller has a policy that goes from February 1st to February 1st. A buyer buys it April 1st. He can transfer that policy, and it's a pretty simple process, just like a one-page form, that we basically don't ever cancel that policy. The same policy number, same effective date, same premium, everything stays the same except for the name on there, And we could transfer that policy from the seller to the new buyer. And that's kind of the way we did it at first. See, an easier way to do it now is to roll it over as a new policy, because you can do that as well, which the nice thing about rolling it over is then all of a sudden the new buyer gets an effective date that matches his closing date. And all of a sudden it becomes a much cleaner transaction to where the seller gets a refund. So instead of having to be like, hey, wait, how come I didn't get money at closing? Or hey, where did my refund go? They are getting a refund. It becomes much more like a similar cancellation of a policy due to a house being sold, And that's probably the way we've leaned more the last several months, last year really, because it's a lot cleaner. It's a lot cleaner for the realtor, the closing company, everybody involved, and especially the seller, which is typically our client a lot of times if we're doing it, because now they're not mad. Because a lot of times we'll have a seller that has the policy with us, the new buyer calls us because, hey, we see that you have your current insured with this company at this rate. Sometimes we can match it, sometimes we can't, depending on how long ago the policy was put in place. But they call us a lot, and so it makes it easier to transition that relationship from the current client to the new client, But yes, you can do it a couple different ways, but it has to be an NFIP policy. That's the key there.
Okay. And there's a process to it. You mentioned a one-page.
It's a one-page form. The transfer is very easy. Rewriting it is, rolling it over is also very easy. All we need to do that is the current declaration page. So say if it's a client of ours, it becomes incredibly easy because we don't need to contact you guys or contact the current homeowner. It's, if the policy is not with us, then it becomes a little bit of a cat and mouse game, because we're like, hey, can anybody contact this person? Sometimes these people don't even live in the country and sometimes don't even speak English, to where it's like you can't email them or contact them, and it becomes a bit of a cat and mouse game. And we've had some that actually fell through because we're like, they don't have it or we can't tell if they have it, But yeah, the transferable assumable policy has been a huge hot topic for us as agents. And it's also why a lot of clients I have that, we were talking earlier about these clients that paid off their mortgages. Some are on fixed income, some aren't. They just don't want to spend $5,000 a year for homeowners and $2,000 a year for flood. I've actually talked a lot of my clients out of canceling their flood policy. I say, hey, look, if you want to cancel your homeowners, that's fine. Don't cancel your flood. You're paying $1,200 a year for flood. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times I'll lead off with the question, do you have any intention of selling your house in the next few years? And sometimes it's no intention at all. I'm never selling it. Sometimes it's like, well, I don't know. We'll see what happens. Anytime that second answer comes up, I say, well, I would definitely think twice about canceling this policy, especially some are like $700, $800 a year. I said, number one, not only are you having the coverage there, God forbid, look what's happened the last few years in our city, you know. Sure. Not only do you have the coverage there, which is important, but now if you sell that house, all of a sudden, and I'll do a new flood quote with them right there on the spot, and it takes like 5 minutes. I say, your new buyer would be paying $3,700 a year. Wow. You're paying $700 or $800 or $1,200. When you sell that house, it's going to be a lot easier for you to sell that house to somebody knowing that, hey, this is what I'm paying for flood, versus the surprise of, the sticker shock of like, oh, welcome to Florida, welcome to flood zones, It
can make it easier to sell the house when they got a assumable low flood insurance policy.
You're 100%. More in the expertise of that arena, but I'd imagine it has to help.
100% does. And from a seller standpoint, is it just call your insurance company and you can find out if it's assumable? Is it that easy, or how to?
Yeah, it's a quick phone call. And again, the nice thing about it, if it's NFIP, and the nice thing, the easiest thing to do is get a copy of the declaration page, because even if it says Allstate, USA, Hartford, Wright, Monarch, it'll say at the top National Flood Insurance, Kalispell, Montana. Which is their headquarters, and then it's NFIP. So those are almost always, at least for the ones I've dealt with, are always transferable. It's once you get into the private ones. So if you see anybody that has Neptune, you see anybody that has Beyond Flood, that's when it starts to become. And we've had some that, again, few, but some, maybe 1 out of 9, 1 out of 10, that have been transferable. But it's up to the company's discretion and whether they're willing to keep insuring in that area. So.
Well, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I want to dig in just a little bit deeper. What do homeowners do to reduce their premiums? What do they do? Like, if they want lower insurance, what's your recommendations?
So, you mentioned things with your home to where you added the third nail. The third nail is one of the bigger ones, especially for older houses. My parents, I mentioned how they have a 73 house too, by the way, so they're paying an arm and a leg, but they saved like $3,000 a year just by adding the third nail. They got a new roof after Ian, and the problem is their roof before was a tile roof, like 30 years old. So all the stuff was up to code with the new roof. However, the coding for Eclipse has changed where you need a third nail. So we had to pay somebody like $2,000 to crawl up in the attic and smash a nail in there, which I'm surprised there's more people that aren't willing to do that. It seems like pretty good money, but then again, getting in an attic in Florida in the summer.
Oh, wow.
It's not fun. I've been up there.
Yeah.
I hate getting stuff out in Halloween just because it's like...
No way, man. Been up in my attic and it sucks. There's no space up there.
I would imagine being up there for hours has got to be torturous, but it's worth it though, because they pay $2,000 to almost instantly save $3,000.
Yeah,
so
no brainer.
So there's discounts you can do with wind mitigation. Wind mitigation reports is something too. If you don't have one of those, get one, because it does exactly like the name says. It mitigates your wind portion of the premium, not down to nothing, but by thousands and thousands of dollars. But opening protection is one. It's, to me, I tell people the opening protection, if they have everything else, a lot of times from a discount standpoint, it's not worth it. Because, hear me out, because if you are getting, there's only so much meat you can scrape off the bone on the wind mitigation report. A wind mitigation report mitigates, but doesn't eliminate wind portion of the premium. So if you have, clips, so the third nail and clips, if you have, the 8-penny nail spaced 6 by 6 inches, which is another discount. If you have all the other discounts and then all you're missing is opening protection, it's not going to reduce that much. You see what I'm saying? Now, if you have none of those other discounts, which I'll say problem, it's a good thing, but most of the houses in our area have new roofs in the last 3 to 5 years. So a lot of them do have the new code and so new discounts for everything else. So when you're adding this final discount on there, it's like, okay, $200. So now does it amount to a $15,000 to $25,000 job for windows and doors? I don't know. That's not I say do it for your preference, do it for your peace of mind, because it is nice. Every storm we've been through the last few years, I'm like, man, I'm an idiot. The day before, I'm like, why didn't I get those shutters? Why didn't I get those windows? But again, the reason why is because my house is 2002. I'm getting the max discounts elsewhere. Okay. It doesn't save me enough to justify doing it.
So you don't have shutters or anything?
I don't.
Okay.
It's because, again, I quoted on my policy, it's like $150 savings.
Sure.
So but is it worth...
Are your windows hurricane?
No, so I have a couple that are. They got replaced in Ian. I have a couple that are. Most of them are not. But kind of going off what I was saying earlier about these houses that have been here for 20 years. It's made it this far. I guess they'll see.
No, yeah. And by the way, I fully agree with what you're saying. And I could hear Lona's thoughts back there because going through a hurricane, when we had hurricane windows, the return on investment's not there, but I would say that peace of mind obviously has a value. So if you're already going to replace the windows at some point, what is the difference between replacing them with regular windows and or versus going to like hurricane windows type thing? That'd be one thing to consider.
Yeah.
And then like when we were going through Hurricane Ian, not having one to screw with putting up the shutters and stuff, because we did that, by the way.
Yeah.
When we first moved to Cape Coral, we lived in a house that was an old house, and we had to use the plywood method.
Yeah. A lot of people do that.
Have you ever went out searching for plywood during a hurricane?
I did for the first couple of storms and realized it's just gone. By the time I thought of mine to do it with Irma, for example, I was like, oh, there is no plywood. So good luck. So for a while, actually, after Irma, I had plywood in my garage. Again, we didn't have a major storm from 17 to 22.
Yeah.
So I think
Irma was supposed to be big.
Irma was supposed to be real bad. Actually, that was the only storm. That was the first and last storm I ever left for. And I mean, I got out of my house for Ian. I went to a friend's house in the middle of Cape Coral because it's away from the water. As I mentioned, I'm right across from the river. So I was having flashes of my son floating down the river. Yeah. But one thing with Irma that was spooky is before every storm, companies will shut down. They'll say 2-3 days before, okay, we're no longer going to write new policies. And that happens. And you have everybody calling you saying, hey, I need homeowners insurance. I'm like, I can't do anything. Irma was spooky because for as long, I'd been in the industry about 5 or 6 years at that point. And my dad's been doing this, like I said, for over 30 years. And when he told me that the companies closed down, some of them 2 weeks early, like 10 days early. I mean, this thing was still a huge spiraling monster in the middle of the Atlantic. There was no cone of uncertainty at this point. There was nothing that was really in focus. But when companies started shutting down early, like earlier than usual, I was like, maybe it's time to get the hell out of Dodge. Mm-hmm. And again, I probably wouldn't have left, but you get some pressure from the wife. At the time, my son was 4, so he wasn't the best swimmer. And I'm thinking, man, I don't know what's going to happen if we get flood here. And I want to say it was a big nothing bomb. It was still a very impactful storm to the whole state, but it wasn't what it was supposed to be. And I think that's also what screwed up a lot of people with Ian. Thinking, oh, Irma was so bad, but wasn't. And then Ian happens, like, oh, wow, this is the real deal.
Well, let me tell you something. Lona is the calmest person when a hurricane is coming, or she doesn't fear. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. Okay. No, I'm joking. She's like, worried about the dogs. Are we going to have to like life jackets for the dogs? How are we going to get them on the roof? Because we got 2 German Shepherds. Like, how are we going to get them on the roof if we got to get on the roof? I'm like, babe, I think we're 20 feet above sea level. I think we're going to be okay.
It's definitely still. It's nerve-wracking. I think the wives are usually the first to start getting the nerves rattled up, and which maybe gets us riled up. But both storms had me definitely worried. Ian especially, maybe because we stayed. I mean, Irma, we went up to our families up in Ohio by Cleveland. My dad was already up there, and he was talking a couple of days before Irma going, hey, we're flying back. I go, what? You're going to be the only person on that damn plane flying back to Florida. I said, stay up there. We'll come drive up there, and we did. We met them in Avon Lake, which is a couple hours to the west of Elyria and Cleveland. And we hung out there for the week and watched the whole thing happen on TV, but which turned out to be not a whole lot. But it's funny. Ian, I mentioned I went to a friend of mine's who's kind of by Mariner in Cape, more central, out of the flood zones. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned impact windows and shutters. So he has shutters on his whole house, and I helped him put some of them up. I went to his house for Ian the day before, helped him put some of them up. And again, as much as I may be being stupid by not putting shutters on there, I was actually in his bathroom. And this during the storm, and something smashed the window. I mean, completely shattered the shutter right there. Bam, And had he not had that shutter on, he would have had, I think it was a piece of PVC fence that would have just come right through the window. I mean, I guess I'm not even really thinking about me getting glass shattered. But I mean, once a window goes, that's when damage can really happen to the inside of a house. Yeah. So they are important, even if it's not, like you said, peace of mind. All it takes is, that's what they call impact resistant. All it takes is one piece of something flying 150 miles an hour, which there is a lot of things that,
Well, on that point, just to finish that point is there's also that value add to where, one, we're not messing with putting up shutters before the hurricane. Sometimes that can get a little tricky, find someone to help you if you do need help. But I realize there are those shutters that are pretty easy to put up for a lot of people.
Some easier than others.
Yeah, and it seems like there's some that got those high windows and whatever. But we were looking out at the storm through our hurricane windows. We're not really worried about, obviously the windows can break, but they're designed to take that, high impact. But being able to see out versus feel like we're claustrophobic and shut up, well, that we learned Dude, that's a huge thing for us, right?
No, it was. So actually, his house has shutters on the backs and on the sides, and he has one huge bay window in the front, and then his master bathroom, which is impact rated. So we spent a lot of the storm at those windows, kind of just watching the disaster. I mean, watching porta potties. Oh yeah, I mean
birds.
Yeah, and he was in North Cape, to where a lot of it's fields. I mean, it was almost like, I'm saying, right across the street from his house is a football field, basically, of not but just the size of just lots. And you're just watching this porta potty fly around like a tumbleweed, and like, oh, it's gonna hit that fence. Bam, smashes the fence. Fence breaks up. Now that smashes a tree. I mean, that was one of the most insane things I've ever witnessed. And yes, having the impact glass definitely is something that brings peace of mind. At the same time, I'll tell you another story from a friend of mine that lives actually like a couple blocks from my buddy's house. He has an impact window on his front of his house, and he actually, I wish I had the picture with me somewhere in my phone, but he's actually, him and his wife for like half the storm are sitting there holding it up because it blew in.
What?
It blew in. Him, his wife, and his son are sitting there holding the window up for like hours. I mean, they had to take breaks and stuff. I mean, but he sent us all a picture like, dude, this is insane. I insure him, so we got to go through the claims process with that afterwards. But
why did that wasn't installed correctly?
It must not have been installed correctly. The insurance company still paid for it. Ian was a bit of a tooth and nail kind of thing with a lot of clients. So I know he went through a little bit of a ringer, because it's like, well, is that faulty work? And that's something you have to be careful. Make sure you're going through properly licensed and insured people, because that is something that if the company didn't pay for it, he would have had to go back to the installer. But yeah, it's usually, I don't think they're supposed to do that. Usually, I don't think you fall in that situation.
So new homes, they get the lower rates because they already are built to those codes. So that's the biggest thing. But on older homes, you said third nail is the huge one, the roof, and not necessarily the openings and stuff. So it takes someone good like you, knowledgeable, to say, hey, return on investment, you got to consider all those things.
You got to consider it. A couple other things to try to mention about pricing on homeowners insurance, that like, again, you can always add nail and you can always add impact glass or shutters. And just, too, it's the same discount, whether you have impact glass or shutters, it's the same discount, which is kind of crazy to me, because it's like, well, I could have shutters and get a discount for it, but what's to stop me from not putting them up?
Yep.
Like you said, sometimes it can be a pain in the ass. With my buddy's house, there's a couple that would not go on. They were very stubborn, and that's why when I came over, I helped them put them on. But there's a lot of things you can change. One thing you can't change, though, which is a hot topic when I talk to clients. Some clients call me or building houses a year or 2 years out. What are things to look for homeowners insurance? And one thing I always tell them all is the shape of the roof. A hip roof makes a huge difference on price. Maybe not the first early years, but once you get to a house that's 20, 30, 40 years old, you're talking about, a 10%, 5% discount on something that's $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. It's pretty big, and you cannot change that, But hip roof is where, think of like a pyramid if it were a big square. It comes down on all sides, Some elaborate roofs are more, you have kind of different angles and stuff. But you have the gables where it just comes up to a point in front. A lot of times in front of the garage or in front of the house. And that's something you unfortunately can't change later on. You could add better nail and you could add impact glass. You cannot change the shape of the roof.
That means on the sides, it's more like a sail, like it's just a big flat wall that takes the wind. Right?
I think that's, again, I'm not a builder, and I'm not an insurance actuarial, but I'm imagining that's what it is. You're giving it a leverage point for wind to get underneath it. So
makes sense. So how do you feel about people self-insuring then when they're paid off?
On the record, always buy insurance. Off the record, I can't blame some people, especially people that maybe could afford to sustain a loss like that and feel like, so somebody once told me that insurance is kind of like legalized gambling in a way. I mean, you're basically hedging your bet. You're paying $2,000 or $4,000 or $10,000 a year to maybe be there for when the big one comes. And, is that going to happen next year or the year after? But I mean, how many years do you have to look at the break even of, okay, $10,000 a year? I have clients that do pay $10,000 a year, and these aren't mansions. These are just older houses in Cape Coral. It's crazy. So they go 8 years and pay $80,000 to maybe cover their $90,000 tile roof if something happens? I mean, I can't blame them for doing that, It's a little scary, for them and for us, because I'm like, well, good luck, but call us back in a couple of years when these rates get better finally. But it's definitely scary,
Absolutely. I want to get your final thoughts. Let's do a rapid fire round real quick.
All right, let's go.
Let's finish this thing up. I think we got a lot of good information. Well, let me ask you this before I give you the rapid fire lightning round. Is there anything that you see question-wise or any topic that we left off that people need to know when it comes to insurance that you typically get, or do you think we pretty much covered it all?
We did a pretty good job of covering it. I think we got most of it in there. I mean, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that we didn't really talk about. So,
Well, I guess I did leave one question off. How often should people be reviewing or shopping their policy? That's a big one. I forgot about that.
that is a good question. And actually, going into 2025, I mentioned earlier that rates are starting to kind of flatten out, not necessarily go down per se, but new companies are coming in which are bringing new products that are lower. So now is the first time, I will say honestly, in the last 5 years that makes sense to maybe call and shop.
Okay, so I did think of one quick question before I throw you into our rapid fire round here is, what's your tips for reviewing or shopping policies? How often should you review your policy and or shop it?
So for homeowners insurance, honestly, my answer, and this is an honest answer, the last 4 or 5 years would have been like, it's not worth it. This year, for the first time in years, it finally is, because rates aren't necessarily dropping, but they're flattening out. And we've also had, as we mentioned earlier, there's new companies that have come in. So for the first time, for the first time in years, it seems like we're able to save people money, not just keep them where they were last year, but actually save them money. And that's been a relief. So if you've had homeowners insurance, if you haven't rewritten your policy at least in 2 or 3 years, it's worth a call. It's worth a call to see. Quotes are free. It's all it takes is 10, 15 minutes of your time to get it. And then the rest is on us. So,
Well, I saw a rule of thumb is like every year. Is that not?
So we have clients that do it every year. It's not always fruitful. I mean, and I get it. It's like I tell clients that if you want to call me every year, call me when you get that renewal offer. We can check and see. It doesn't always happen though. I mean, it depends. That's the thing. It's not really a sure thing. The last 4 or 5 years, it's never been. I mean, once we found a company, because the problem is everyone went up. If your company went up 30%, then the next company went up 30%, or maybe even 40%. So unless you saw like a huge increase from like 2,000 to 6,000, there was a good chance you weren't going to save any money. And if your rate went from 3,600 to 3,650 this year, like I just did one actually before I left today. It was nothing cheaper. So it depends. But it now is the first time in years it's been at least a decent time. I want to say good time. Hopefully next year will be a great time to call. But this year it's starting to seem like it's a good time. So
Good time to check it out.
Good time to check it out for sure.
Awesome. So let's get some final thoughts in rapid fire. What's your favorite restaurant in Southwest Florida?
I guess it depends on the mood.
You can go more than one if you
More than
like.
one? Okay, all right, we'll go. So I love seafood. Honestly, one shame is my favorite place to eat seafood was Burt's, but I don't know if you know Burt's on Matlacha. It's been gone. I do love Michelli's, though. I love that whole area. Matlacha is one of my favorite spots. For seafood, I would say Michelli's is up there. As far as Italian goes, I have a good friend of mine who's going to hate me saying anything other than Mangia Bene. Mangia Bene is delicious. If I wasn't going to Mangia Bene, it'd probably be Ariani's. I do love Ariani's.
Wow, I don't think I've been to either one of those places.
Mangia Bene's got fantastic pizza, and the penne alla vatca is probably my personal favorite. Ariani's, if you haven't been there, they are fantastic. They're really, really good.
Ariani's, where's Ariani's at?
It's around Del Prado by, where, TJ Maxx, yep, right by CC's, which is another fun one if, we go there every once in a while after football practice.
Sounds like Lona's been there without me, but I'm not 100% sure. We'll circle back around on that.
You got to take him there sometime if you haven't, because he needs to eat there.
All right. So what do you get at, I don't think I can even say the first name. Where's that one at? The one that's not on Del Prado.
Michelli's?
Oh, no, I know where Michelli's is, but you mentioned two Italian.
They're both on Del Prado. So I live on Del Prado, so I'm a little biased to my region. But Mangia Bene's is right in Coralwood, and they're literally right next to the movie theater.
Okay.
And it's one of my good friends. They've been there for a long time, and they do a good job with their food.
What you go there? What's your favorite dish?
I've had to watch my blood work recently, so I haven't been there as much. But the penne alla vatca is to die for.
Oh man! All right, what's the biggest insurance myth that you see?
There's a lot of them. We get calls all the time with questions. I'm like, okay, I know there's no such thing as a stupid question, but where do I begin? No, but probably the biggest one that I hear a lot is people call me, whether it's a current client or new client, and say, hey, is it true that if I drive less than 5 miles a day, I only have to pay $25 a month for auto insurance? And I blame Facebook for that, because if you go on Facebook, they always have these ads. If you drive less than, so click here.
Yes.
If you like to get blown up with telemarketers, then click there and put all your information in, because that is a complete myth. Unfortunately, mileage does matter on your car. A lot of companies nowadays have telematic devices that track the mileage if you're willing to do it for discounts. But there's no such thing as a 5 mile a day discount rate, unfortunately.
Okay. Who wins in a fishing competition, me or you?
Ooh, are we under the water or above it?
Good answer. Good answer. Not even fair, right?
I guess not.
Man, I want to thank you so much for being on our show. let's tell everybody where to find you. What's your, tell them what's your website, your phone number, social media, that kind of stuff, where we find you.
So you can find us, we're pretty ranked high on Google in Fort Myers. We're Wilcox Family Insurance. It's Wilcox, Family Insurance, all spelled out.com. We do have a Facebook page. If you are in Fort Myers, we're not too far from you. We're right by the SM Mall, about 2 blocks north of the SM Mall. If you like to eat at Red Lobster, we're about 2 lights north of Red Lobster. So if you like McDonald's, it's about 2 lights after us. So, but yeah, we'd love to try to help save people money. And for the first time in years, it feels like we're able to do that. So feel free to give us a call if you think you're paying too much.
Okay. Are you on social media?
We are. We have a Facebook presence. We're not huge on Facebook. It's something I'm trying to work on, I guess, as the new generation. I've never really been a whole social media guy, so that's been a change for me. But I've realized that in the modern day, you kind of have to survive. So
we'll help you with that.
All right. Hey, let's do it.
And final thoughts. Do you have any final thoughts? Anything we didn't cover?
Oh, man, I don't know what else we didn't cover. If you have $100 to your name right now, put it on the Bucks to win the Super Bowl next year. That's a good bet. Thank me later. It's probably good odds right now. I actually haven't looked, and I'm not a betting man, but I'd imagine it is. As far as insurance, I think things are turning around. So for anybody that's been paying these absurd homeowners insurance rates the last few years, just steadfast, because it's getting better. It's going to get better. I have faith that this hurricane season is going to be a good one. I think the reason why is because these insurance companies have a pretty good idea of the future. I don't know how they do, but their numbers tell them. And that's why we're hearing things like DeSantis saying rates are lower, and CEOs from companies are saying rates are going to be lowered next year, hopefully. It's because I think they have a good idea that these storm cycles are hopefully coming to an end, at least for this one, and then we'll deal with next ones in the next decade or so. So
I'm so happy to hear you say that, man. I really am. Not just for me, but for my clients and everybody else living here, because such a big fear, wondering if the Florida dream was disappearing just because, not just insurance, but everything, tax, just everything. And,
yeah.
We've
had a lot of clients that have come down just in the last few years going, wow, this is not what I expected. But again, if you hold out, I think it's getting better. I really do.
Awesome. Thanks again, Mark, for coming on the show. Everyone watching, what's your experience with insurance been like? What questions do you have? Any questions that you have, drop them down in the comment section, and we'll get Mark to come on here and answer those questions or help us with those. Any questions that you would like to have asked on a future episode, let us know. Drop them in the comments. But don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone that you think it would help out. And thank you all for watching.
Hey, thanks for having me again, Doug. I appreciate it.